There you are. Hello, my friends. Hello, my life warriors, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Day In, Day Out podcast. Woo! Today on episode 338, I'm very lucky, privileged to have Becky Upchurch on the podcast. She is, how can I put it? She is a clarity and mindset coach, and yeah, she's helping ladies wow, find the word no and not feel guilty about it, providing them with freedom, enjoying their free time as much as they can, and finding some, well, purpose. Who knows? Becky, how are you today, my lady?
I am wonderful. I'm excited to be here. So thank you very much for having me.
The pleasure's all mine. The pleasure's all mine. Now, I have to ask now, how did uh how did this lovely lady who went to Florida State of all places yeah, find her way in the realm of, yeah, coaching?
So I will tell you that the Florida coursework came a little bit later in my journey. Interestingly enough, I went to school. I kind of had, like a lot of young folks, I had ideas of things I wanted to do, and then I ended up not pursuing those things. Ended up getting into public education, and so that was kind of my first foray into teaching. And from there, I left the classroom to become an instructional coach. And instructional coaching is something that I love. I love working in the world of education. But through my coach training, I started really thinking about the implications of coaching, and not just for education, but for life and the world, which is what eventually led me to go to an ICF accredited coaching program. And I just loved it. And so it's kind of, I joke around a lot of times that I'm a coach in various areas because I still do work in the world of education. But what I really, really am passionate about is the mindset piece, and how our brains work, and how our choices are really controlled a lot of the time by our thinking, and how we don't often realize that. And if we really can get comfortable with digging into how we're thinking about our experience of the world, we can actually change our experience of the world. And to me, that's just such a powerful concept, and something that I feel like I want everyone to know. So I think on the outside it sometimes seems strange, like, oh, you went from being a teacher to being a mindset coach. But I really see this as another form of teaching, because one of my core values is educating people. And I think that being able to educate people about simple ways that they can create shifts to have a big impact in their lives is one of the most important things that we can ever learn.
No, I hear you. I hear you. No, because like the way I look at coaches with compared to teachers, teachers are there. They're teaching you everything like this, but they don't actually try to get you to implement it in a like practical manner. Like they don't make you a practitioner right away. It's like, yeah, you've learned this maths, great. Now put it to practice. No, but with a coach, it's like, yeah, you're like going, okay, these are the things we've learned, and like, you know, been working on this. Now apply it into a practical real life situation, circumstance. That's how I see the two different things. So like, how did that transition, if you can sort of tell me, that sort of transition from teaching to coaching, what was the sort of main thing you picked up from, what was the lesson you learned?
I think one of the biggest things in coaching, and one of the things that initially in my first coach training, when I heard it, it was kind of like, oh, this is a little jarring, because I feel like coming from the classroom, especially in traditional classroom environments where you're the bringer of knowledge, and there's a lot of responsibility on you to be the doer. I think that has shifted in education, which I'm very happy about. Um, but in coaching, the idea that it's really not about me at all, right? I am there to support, and again, I bring that teaching element of sharing strategies and perspectives and ideas, but it's
Mm,
really about empowering people. And I think that there is kind of a through line there, because I like to think of education as in its best form as empowering young people, empowering them to grow and learn and apply. And so I think it's similar in that way, where I am a facilitator of growth. I'm a facilitator of learning for these women, but I'm not going to tell them what to do and how to do it. And I think that's something that's sometimes misunderstood in coaching, because I think a lot of people who are not in the coaching world think of it as similar to sports coaching, where I'm the expert. I'm going to
Mhm.
teach you how to do something. I'm going to model it. Then you're going to try it. I'm going to give you feedback until you get it right. One of the things that is different about life coaching, mindset coaching, and that I love is I'm not always the one who has all of the answers. Do I have knowledge? Do I have skills that I bring to the table? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's really about helping you to build your own autonomy and your own vision for your life, because I don't know what's best for you. Because I have my own values, you have your own values. They may align, in which case it might be, hey, let me share what worked for me, or let me share some stories or some examples. But we may value very different things. And so helping you to figure out how to align your vision with your values, and then how to make the right, kind of pathway forward. And it's so unique from person to person. There's no universal, obviously there's universal strategies and tools in the profession, but there's no right way for somebody to take their journey, and it's really individualized. And that's something that I love, because I feel like it keeps it interesting, it keeps it fresh. um, and I believe that you should do things that you enjoy, so that makes me happy.
I hear you. I hear you. Oh, I'm glad it brings a smile to your face. Now, one of the things when you said yes, mindset and individual journey, sort of going hand in hand, where what I often see when it comes to people's mindset and like they're sort of like looking to potentially grow, uh, there there's so many sort of, how can I put it, obstacles put in people's way by outside factors like family, friends, also internal factors. Because you often, like when you look around, if you don't see someone doing what you're doing, like where you want to go, it's so much harder when you don't see someone who's walked the path before you. Like overcoming that. How would like what would you say to people, and how would you help them sort of get over these obstacles?
So I think one of the first things is recognizing the fact that somebody always has to be the pioneer. So for every path that you see where it's like, oh, I can see this path forward because I can give you 30 examples of people who have done it, there had to
Hmm.
be a first person. There had to be the person who did it first and modeled it for those other people. And so I think just having that awareness that sometimes we're going to be the 30th person, sometimes we're going to be the 3,000th person or the 300,000th, and sometimes maybe we have an opportunity to be the first person and to be the person who is the pioneer, who is showing other people what's possible. I remember years ago, I was working with a coach at the time, and she talked about some of the work that she was doing in her life and growing her business. And she talked about one of her motivations was seeing what she was capable of and seeing what was possible. And kind of, she used the term blowing her own mind by what she
Mm,
could accomplish. And then also that allowing her to then be a model for other people, for what they might be able to accomplish. And that's something that really resonated with me and has really stuck with me. And I will tell you, and at the times when I feel defeated or I'm frustrated, or maybe I have that similar experience of, oh, what if this isn't possible, or what if this doesn't work? Trying to ground myself in that idea of, but what if it does? Right? And we won't know if something's going to work or not until we try it. And I think a lot of us are socialized to avoid things that are uncomfortable. We're kind of socialized that when things get scary, we back down. And
mhm.
so trying to train ourselves that something being scary doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It depends on context, of course. But we are hardwired for survival, right? If you think about, way back in early man, it was like our fear instinct literally protected us, life or death. We still have that fear instinct, but sometimes it kicks up when we're not in a life or death situation, but our brain doesn't necessarily make the distinction. So I think really interrogating, is this a situation where I'm freaking out because it can't be done, or am I just freaking out because I've never seen it done before and it feels scary to be the pioneer?
Pioneer. Like, yeah, I often like I like the way you said that, because like this is the thing. There are sometimes examples when people have done what they've done, but it's a different time, it's a different age, and the sort of surroundings and environment are similar but not the same. Being that pioneer is somewhat of a harder path to travel. It's just like, yeah, like trying to find that strength, that fortitude to carry on. Like, when you've like, has there been examples of when you've been the pioneer where you've had to sort of find inner strength to like go, yeah, this is the next level I need to get to?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think. I feel like every day I feel like a pioneer in certain ways, just from the aspect of doing things that scare me. And that's one of the things that I think is often misunderstood about people who work in roles like coaches.
Hmm.
Um, I think a lot of people think, oh, this person's a life coach. It means they have their life perfectly together and they don't have fear and they don't have mindset issues. That's absolutely untrue. And I encourage people, if you meet a coach that tells you they don't have any mindset issues that crop up, they don't have fears, they don't have negative thoughts, they don't have an inner critic, I would argue that either that person is lying or delusional. Because I feel like it's just part of the human condition. We all have those fears, we all have those doubts. I think the difference is, what tools do you have, right? So I have a toolkit that a lot of people don't have. And so I'm able to apply those tools. And, some days they work better than others, or some days I engage with them more deeply than others. But I think just the willingness to show up and do the things that scare us kind of puts us in that pioneer place. And it doesn't always have to be, and this is something that I think is also important for people to understand. When we talk a lot in, I think, our daily culture about change and growth, a lot of people see it as it has to be these massive changes. Like, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to completely change my body, and my health is going to go from this side to that side in a 180, or I'm going to completely quit my job and start something brand new, or I'm going to leave my family and start a new one. Whatever big dramatic change it is, right? Um, I think we tend to see things in these big dramatic terms, but it's really the small moments that I think build a life. And I think it's the small moments that create change. And so, kind of grounding ourselves in the idea of, I don't have to do massive, scary things to be a pioneer. It can be something as simple as, oh, I was the first person, not me personally, this is just an example, somebody who is the first person in their family to get a degree past high school, or even the first person in their family to graduate from high school. Or, hey, I'm the first person in my family to own a business. Or I'm the first person who has been able to say no and set boundaries with my family, because we're all very people pleasing and always have been. Or even something, that feels small in the moment. But again, I think it's those small steps that are really impactful, because change doesn't generally happen in big sweeping leaps. I would argue that most of the time, when we try to create change by making these massive, massive shifts, there's almost a boomerang effect. So we make a massive shift, but then we go back. Or it freaks us out so much that we can't handle the fear of it. And so we make ourselves smaller. But if we make very small changes and then we're consistent in those small changes over time, that's what helps us to move the needle.
No, I agree. Like, this is the thing. One of the things I often say, like, if you want to change yourself or change your direction in your life, just do 2% each and every single day. Just 2%. You gotta go.
100%.
You go, what? 2%? Yeah, that 2% can go up or down, or it can go completely backwards. But if you continuously do 2%, 2%, 2%, over the course of 100 days, your level will rise so much compared to what it was before, where you were before. It will it surprises people. And to sort of like add to your point, yeah, when you're pulling and that boomerang effect happens, because you're using so much energy, so much strength to get, do the big leap, when it does like come back at you, it's a case of you now have all of this energy depleted and you're trying to get it back, and it doesn't go as far, and it just eventually it people keep doing it until one day they stop. And like, this is the like common story for 99.9% of the population. Uh, if you go at it like on a regular basis. So, like, I have to ask, you did bring up the realm of boundaries. Now, one of the things like people do find difficult when they are trying to embrace this new realm of change is like sort of defining, well, one, defining what their existing boundaries are, and two, trying to figure out what their new boundaries should be. Like, how do you help ladies do this? I should say.
So I think one of the things that to me is most important in boundaries is they need to be personal to us.
Mm,
It can be very easy to see boundaries that other people hold, and people say, oh, well, you should do this or you should do that. And to think, oh, well, this is the right thing to do, so I'm going to set this boundary because everybody says this is a helpful boundary. The problem with that, I find that the hardest part of boundaries is maintaining them. Setting a boundary is easy, holding a boundary is hard. Um, or feels hard if you don't have the strategies and the tools. So, one of the first things is to really understand what your boundaries are and why you need them. So, if I'm in a situation where maybe there's something that someone is doing that's just giving me kind of an uncomfortable or an ick feeling or a feeling of frustration, to me that's that's a little voice that's like, hey, there's something not quite right here, let's look at that, let's see what's going on, and oh, is this something I need a boundary around? So maybe there's certain topics that I'm uncomfortable talking about and somebody keeps bringing them up, like maybe I'm somebody who has a history of um, disordered eating, and I spend a lot of time with people that talk a lot about food and diet, and it makes me very uncomfortable. Well, I might want to dig into that and say, okay, is this an area where maybe I need to set a boundary for myself? And the for myself part is very, very important because a lot of people would look at that and say, yes, I need to set a boundary to get those people to stop doing that thing that's making me uncomfortable.
mm,
That is not how boundaries work. The boundary is, what boundary do I need so that I can be comfortable? And yes, sometimes that boundary is asking that person, hey, this makes me uncomfortable. When we talk about this. Could we talk about something else?
mm,
But at the end of the day, that person has their own autonomy and they can choose to, yes, honor that request or no to not, right? And it sounds harsh to say that, but there are times where people will set boundaries and then they come back and they say, I'm so frustrated. I've explained to that person how doing XYZ makes me feel, and yet they continue to do it. Well, sometimes it's just a simple disrespect. They just don't care how you feel about it. And sometimes it has more to do with that person. Maybe they don't understand the boundary, so they don't see its importance, or maybe that they just don't have those skills to engage that way with other people. So we really need to go into it with the assumption that I can't count on somebody else to change their behavior because that's not what it's about. I can only control me and what I choose to do. So it might be, I'm going to set this boundary around the conversation. If the person makes the shift, great. If they don't, what am I doing to protect my peace? Right? So then I might say, well, my boundary is I'm not going to engage in those conversations. So maybe I'll leave and go to the restroom. Maybe I won't spend time with that person. Maybe I'll change the subject, right? And those are those individualized things that you have to dig into and figure out what's going to work for you. But in terms of kind of figuring out how do we set a boundary, it has to be around the things that we need to protect ourselves, protect our peace, protect our time, protect our energy. I find that really grounding in kind of our values and our vision. What matters most to me? What aligns with the life that I want to live? What aligns with how I want to show up in the world for myself, for others? And then choosing behaviors accordingly based on those things. Because again, if I'm setting a boundary based on some arbitrary thing, it's going to be really hard for me to anchor to that boundary, especially if I get pushback when it comes time to kind of put it into motion.
mm. I that's the thing. I think with many people would set boundaries or setting rules for themselves, they they fail to do the actual foundational work behind it. Because, like, it's as you say, it's easy to say something. This is my new rule. This is what's gonna happen in my life. Blah 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 blah. I'm not gonna like let anyone break that rule, cross that boundary whatsoever. But they haven't done the work. And if you're building something on sand, all it takes is a good wind, or like, yeah, a bit of water coming in to wash away wherever you like trying to build. And I think that work, that foundational work, is so important, especially in this day and age, for many people, to like know, well, to set up that sort of north star, to give them that sort of guiding light to go forward. Uh, it's just so tricky, and like I'd say, it's one of those things where you can't just do it over a weekend. You can't just do it over a month. And I think many people are trying to find that quick fix answer, if you get what I mean.
Hmm. I like to liken it to muscle growth. You know, you don't go to the gym one time, lift weights one time, and suddenly you've changed your whole body, right?
Mm,
You go and you have to practice. You have to put it, put in the work, but also you have to be consistent, right? Because if I go to the gym and I lift weights and then I don't go again for a month and I lift weights one more time and then I don't go again for 2 months, I'm not going to see any consistent change. And it's the
mm,
same concept with boundaries. If I set a boundary, but then somebody's like, well, that's stupid, I'm not doing that. And I say, okay, you're right. Um, and then I let it go. And then I try to set the boundary again. And I'm not practicing. And it's like with any new skill, you have to practice it in order for it to become a habit. And one of the things, so this kind of goes back to the 2%, shift that you were talking about earlier, is when we're trying to create change, I believe that the best way to do that is to make it as easy as possible. So to make it small, but also to implement it in ways that work. So I like to give the example of, if you are new to boundaries and you're like, okay, I'm going to practice setting boundaries so that I can flex that muscle over and over and over. Don't pick the person in your life that it's hardest to say no to, right? If you've always struggled, with being a people pleaser with your parents or with your partner, don't choose them. Choose the random coworker that you're not as emotionally invested or tied to. Practice the boundary there so that you can start building that muscle, you can start building that comfort level before you move into the more challenging experiences. It's like if I'm trying to get back into exercise and I haven't exercised in 5 years, I might start with walking. I'm not going to sign up for a marathon tomorrow and just go out there and run, right? If I did that, people would be like, you're crazy. You've never run a day in your life. What are you thinking? Yet when we try to change in other areas, we often do kind of that same thing metaphorically. We try to take these massive leaps, and then when we don't make it, or when it's too hard, we blame ourselves and we say, oh, it doesn't work, or I can't do it. No, you can do it, and it does work. You just have to find the approach and the strategies that are going to work for you in your situation.
yeah, no, like this is the thing. I like the gym analogy about, yeah, if you haven't gone and like not having that consistency, because yeah, that's the easiest way most people pick up injuries along the way. And I think with regards to injuries people pick up when they are trying to put in that sort of mindset shift and that emotional change, is they get emotional injuries and they get like mental injuries. And when I say mental injuries, it's like things which will either knock their confidence, like take them down a path which is not ideal, or basically move them further away from their goal. And it's like they just, like, people don't realize, yes, if you're not doing that work, if you're not getting like stronger, like strong, like um boundary stronger or boundary fit. Like this is bro science just coming off my head right now.
I love it.
Yeah, it's going to fail you always in the in the short term, and basically in the long term as well. You know.
Absolutely. And it really is that. I like that they use that term, that mental injury, and because it really is, we don't think about the mental impact of, trying something and quote unquote failing. And a lot of times we talk to ourselves in very negative ways when we perceive that we have failed, but sometimes we're not even aware of it. And we're not aware of how much of that negativity we're internalizing and how it's impacting whether or not we take action in the future. So if inside my brain somewhere there's a little voice, whether I can hear it or not, telling me, oh, well, doing that isn't going to work, or you're not going to be successful, or you can't do it, I'm more likely to not do it, right? So we have to kind of train ourselves. Again, it goes back to that idea of being willing to be a pioneer for ourselves, being willing to put ourselves out there and try something we haven't tried before, and practice getting used to that discomfort, right? And I say practice because, I don't think it's something, some people say, oh, you just get used to the discomfort. I know people who are massively, massively, massively successful in this world who will tell you, I have discomfort every day of my life, right? I have fear every day of my life. I have questions. I have hesitations. So if we're sitting around waiting for the absence of those things, we're going to be sitting around waiting for the rest of our lives. So thinking about how can I approach this differently next time? So if I try to do something and it doesn't quite work, taking the time to really dig in and say, well, why didn't this work? Was it my approach? Was it that I tried to do too much? Was it that I tried to focus on the wrong person initially and I should have gone for like the low hanging fruit? Or was it that I didn't actually have a concrete plan of what I was going to do? I just decided I was going to set a boundary, but maybe I didn't practice what I was going to say or how I was going to say it. Or maybe I didn't prepare for pushback and it came, like you said, it's like that hard wind and it blew me back and I didn't know what to do with it. So really looking at if something doesn't go well, what about it didn't go well? Not so that I can blame myself, but so that I can pivot and come up with a new game plan for next time.
Mm. Yeah, like this is very. There's so many things which could be like talked upon with what we just said, because like yeah, when it comes to that inner voice, that inner critic, which okay, people like go, some people go, I never hear it. Delusional lot, yes, but like the whole thing is like that inner voice. If it was a person standing in front of you, like interacting with you on a day to day basis, you would like let's just say like conversation and politeness with reason would not exist because you would be like, yeah, raising up your fist and hitting that person, even though that plays constantly in most people's minds. Like, and I would say for the vast majority, it's the thing what keeps people in place, or like, yeah, in worst case scenario, brings people down to their lowest ebb. But the people it sort of pushes on and they go take like making them like okay, I've heard what you've said, shut up, it's time to like yeah, it's time to go, and they push themselves into that place of discomfort. And as you said, that like some of the most successful and richest people, and I'm not saying like rich because of money and wealth whatnot, but it's just the act like the circumstances they put themselves into in that place of discomfort every day is because they want to push themselves, they want to grow, they want to develop. And when you are doing these things, it will always lead you to a slightly scary place because you are on that voyage of discovery of who you potentially can be. And I think the world would be a richer place if more people could actually do this. But you know what I mean? It's scary. And I think that's what holds people back, the fear, you know?
Hmm. I agree with that. And I think sometimes it can be our own fear. And I think sometimes it can actually be other people's fear on our behalf. Because I
Mm,
know in my own life, I've experienced that where people who care for me very deeply and are very invested in my life want to protect me from things that are scary, right? So if you think about like the analogy of a parent who has a child who's going out into the world for the first time, maybe they're going away to college, and that child wants to go study abroad. And it's a great opportunity. And maybe they're a little scared, but they're really excited. And maybe their parents are terrified because the
mm,
idea that their child's going to be so far from home and they are somewhere where they don't have any family and they don't have a support system. So they're afraid. And it's not necessarily a bad scenario that this child is getting into, but that protective mechanism kicks in. And so maybe they're saying things to their kid like, are you sure you want to do this? Are you going to be okay being so far from home? And they have the best of intentions, right? They're trying to
mm.
make sure that their child is making a good decision and they're trying to protect them. But maybe that child is going to then internalize those fears. So maybe even if they do go, they're going to be thinking, I'm all alone here. What if something happens? What if, I need somebody and there's nobody around? My parents are so far away. I don't have any friends here. So I think sometimes we can internalize our own fears, but sometimes we internalize the fears of those around us. And that sometimes is even harder, especially if it's people that we trust, people that we love, and people that we know have our best interests at heart, or people who have been our caretakers or our protectors, right? So I think about that even now. It's like I'm almost 50 years old. And I still think about, sometimes my mother will say things that I can look at it and see, think that, oh, it's a protective mechanism and it's just a mom worrying. But it's taken me a long time to get to that place of not internalizing some of those fearful voices that are well intended, but not always helpful.
Yeah, like this is the thing. I like the fact that you're coming from the sort of light side of human nature, but like there is also the dark side of it all, where it comes from a point of okay, yeah, you like, hey, look at Sally over there. She's like, yeah, she's going out there, she's getting educated, she's doing this, and she's pushing to this next level. You may like this person may have been friends with Sally for 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden it's like yeah, so what have you done with your life? It's like like all of a sudden Sally is becoming like a very sort of uncomfortable mirror of like unmet expectations from a person, where they like, in order to stop that mirror working, they all of a sudden like, oh yeah, hey Sally, you don't want to do that. It's not going to really serve you. What's that going to help you? Blah, blah, blah. And those voices, and like, I'm not going to say it's everybody, because it's not, it comes like, there, sometimes it comes from a place of good, as you say, and sometimes it comes out of a place of insecurity on that person's part. To like stop that insecurity, they drag down that person to keep them where they are. The crabs in the bucket metaphor, as they say. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say also sometimes it can be intentionally ill intended. And sometimes it can be not. Sometimes it might be I'm trying to pull you down because I'm jealous or I'm comparing, but I might not even know that that's what I'm doing. I might not
Mm.
even have the awareness. And so I think it's important, and this is much easier said than done, I know, but I think it's really important to separate who we are and what we're doing and the path that we're on from everybody around us. Because when we are looking to other people for, you know, whether it be, oh, I need, I want cheerleaders, which I'm all about supporting people, I'm all about getting support.
Mhm.
But when my choice to move forward is predicating on somebody else's ability to support me, or somebody else's ability to not say things that are negative, I'm going to be in some real trouble, because there is a lot of negativity in the world. I do try to, look for positives in things, of course, but I had somebody tell me once, they said, you know what I like about you? They said, you're not one of those life coaches that pretends everything's great. You talk about the reality of what is, and then you do try to find, positive ways forward. But I'm not somebody who's ever going to pretend that the world is sunshine and roses, because there are a lot of people out there who aren't necessarily going to be supportive, or they're going to judge you, or they're going to talk about you. Um, but at the end of the day, I feel like our relationship to ourself is the thing that matters most. And if we are nurturing that relationship, and again, it goes back to what you mentioned earlier about doing the deeper work. If I know foundationally who I am, and I know what I believe in, I know what I value, and I'm living into that, I'm going to develop a much thicker skin, and I'm going to be much more comfortable just I'm going to take my path and I'm going to stay on this road. And if you don't understand it, that's okay, because you don't need to understand it. You don't need to understand the inner workings of my brain and my heart and what matters most to me. Certainly, there are people in our lives that we invite into that. But I really feel like it goes back to that idea that everybody is an autonomous human and should get to choose the path that they want to take, provided they're obviously not doing harm to others. And so I can look sometimes at people that have chosen paths and I'm just like, there is no way in the world that that would ever be my life. But at the end of the day, I'm not the arbiter of all things and all people, right? So that person gets to choose. If somebody is in a relationship that I look at and think, oh my gosh, I would be miserable. Okay, well, that's me, right? That's because what I value, what I want, the vision I have for my life is not that. But I
Mm.
don't know what that person's values are. I don't know what that person wants. I don't know, so I don't really get to weigh in on it. And I think if we try to apply that concept in reverse, that, when somebody's commenting on our choices, when somebody's saying, oh, you should do this or you should do that, um, they're doing it from a place of being outside. So they don't actually have the perspective. I'll just share a really quick story. Years
Oh,
ago, when I was starting my business, um, I was working on something. I had a friend who was doing an event, and I needed to create a one pager, and I didn't have any of that kind of stuff. So I was putting it together. I needed to choose a picture. And I didn't have professionally branded photos. I still don't. Many years later, I think photographers are great. It's a weird quirk of mine, but that's a whole other conversation. Um, so I was trying to pick a photo for this one pager, and I had narrowed it down to two different pictures. And I was really struggling. And I texted my sister the pictures, and I'm talking to her about it, and we're going back and forth. And then I had this realization that I had spent like 2 hours, I think at that point, trying to decide on which photo I was going to use. And I was like, well, maybe I'll send it to another one of my sisters. Well, I have four sisters. So this could have been like an all weekend affair, right? So I was like, this is ridiculous. So I messaged my mentor coach at the time, and I explained to her what was going on, and I said, I just can't decide, and blah blah blah. And I said, because I feel like one of them, I look at it and it's me, and it feels like me, but it doesn't look professional, and I worry that people are going to look at it and they're going to be like, oh, she's not professional. I said, and then the other one looks like a professional version of me, but it just doesn't feel like me. It feels like me playing professional. Like, I just kept going back and forth. And I just remember I don't remember the exact words, but the gist of what she said to me was, Becky, get rid of the outside noise. Get rid of the nonsense. Get rid of the should. Get rid of all of that. And just listen to yourself. What is the answer? And I instantly knew. But it took the reminder of, I need to shut out all of the background noise, right?
mm,
Because at the end of the day, I can ask all of these people and they can tell me what they think, but they don't have to live my life. They don't have to run my business. They don't have to be the person that people see the flyers. It's not their face, right? It's not their photo. And so ultimately, we have to really think about, you know, we can't control the outside world. And sometimes there is a lot of negativity out there, and sometimes it can be directed right at us. I mean, I had an incident recently where I was looking to be on podcasts, and somebody commented, and I just was like, wow, I just posted this, innocuous thing and got a response that I was not at all prepared for. And certainly in that initial moment, I like felt that. But then I took a step back and I was like, why do I care? Like, this person doesn't know me. They don't know anything about my life. They don't know what I bring to the table. And they can have their opinion and I can just move on with my day. Right? So I think it's important to really think about, are we internalizing those external things? And if we are, is it serving us? Because I think most of the time it is not. And so remembering that I want to internalize things that serve me. I want to internalize the support and the positivity. I want to internalize the internal voice that tells me, keep going, you can do this. I don't want to internalize my inner critic voice. I don't want to internalize the voices of people who are my naysayers and who may be my external critics, because that is not going to get me where I want to go. One of the things years ago, a coach I was working with would talk about, we ask ourselves often if something is true. We think something, we're like, well, is it true or is it not true? We spend so much time. And she said, how about we just ask, is it helpful? And if it's not, then let's let it go, right? If somebody gives me feedback that doesn't serve me, or somebody shares an opinion or a thought that doesn't serve me, I don't have to lean into that, right? I can just let it go and keep on moving.
mm. No, like this is the thing. Thank you very much for that story. I do like. I love it because like this is the thing. Helping like reframing like the question we're asking ourselves or reframing the activity we're doing. many a times that just leads to the realm of procrastination. Look, I hold up my hands. I've been a master of it on many occasion. Just so you get into this sort of, like, I've often fallen into this loop again and again and again. To just think about this. I've gone through this. I've gone through that. Gone through this. I've gone through every scenario which is possible to stop myself from actually taking action to help myself move forward. And I think with when you said you had to choose a headshot, it was like, yeah, you knew as soon as you like got all the voices to drop away. But it was like, yeah, it's the little tricks our brains play on us, which we don't even realize it's doing to, like, yeah, to stop you, to keep you in that same place, just so you're safe. You're safe here. You don't need to do that. You know what I mean? You could have easily like backed away when someone like put in that, I don't know what they put in the comment of your post, but that sort of barbarous like comment. Like you just think it, like my mind's going, if you can just put out that negativity on someone else's post, you've got a lot of work to do yourself. But you could have used that to stop you from not being on podcasts today. And like going, okay, but, and I think there are a number of people which would have stopped them from doing that. And it may have stopped them from being, God knows what, a myriad of things, taking them to a myriad of different places where they could be like that much better. But because of one person, it keeps them there. And I think with all of those things, it's so tricky to sort of like overcome, so tricky to sort of like keep going at times because of the little tricks your brain plays on you. And you're a coach who's done this for quite some time, you know? And if it still works on you, like for the everyday folk, you know, hey, I don't know. Like when you've had to sort of hold someone's hand through this, what has been like, is there sort of like some sort of common theme of pushback or rejection to, you know what I mean, overcoming this procrastination or moving them, like helping moving people forward?
I think it really depends on the person. And I do think one of the common themes is that people try to go too big when they're trying to create a change. And again, it goes back to if I'm trying to go too big and I keep quote unquote failing, then I start to believe negative things about myself. So I really encourage people to, we create kind of a comprehensive action plan, but then it's like we need to break that down. And I think that's where a lot of people, they think, oh, New Year's is such a big, time for people creating change, and everybody, oh, here's my resolution and here's my plan, and then you look at the plan, and my first thought is usually, okay, now how do we break this first action down, and then how do we break that down, and then how do we break that down, and to make it so small that your brain is almost going to go, that's too small, that's stupid. I'm not going to do that. That's not going to do anything.
Mm,
That's what you want to do. You want to do those pieces that are so small that your brain can't argue against them. Because at the end of the day, like if I say I'm going to start a weight loss program or a fitness habit, and I'm going to work out every day for 30 minutes. And some people say, oh, well, 30 minutes a day, that's not a big deal. But if I've worked out 0 minutes a day for the last year, 30 minutes a day is a lot.
mm,
And if I'm busy and I'm tired, it's going to be really easy for me to go, oh, I can't do it. Or, oh, I woke up late, I don't have 30 minutes. Or, oh, I have this thing at the kids' school and I've got to get there early, I don't have 30 minutes. But if I say, I'm going to do 5 minutes, well, a lot of people's brains are immediately going to go, yeah, 5 minutes of exercise, that's going to do a whole lot. Well, it is if you do it with consistency and build on it. And if I use that 5 minutes to build a habit of I'm somebody who exercises in the morning and I do it for 5 minutes and I do that consistently. And what that does is two things. It helps me to build the habit, but it also helps me to create the elusive motivation. And something that I learned, and I talk about this often, is I feel like for years, I kind of saw motivation the way a lot of people do, is it's this thing that we kind of wait for or hope shows up to get us going. So, oh, I want to go to the gym, I'm not motivated. Or, I was thinking about starting this business, but I don't have the motivation. Or I want to do this thing, but I'm just not motivated. I need to practice my guitar, but I'm not motivated. And we wait like motivation is just going to come land in our laps and guide us forward. And that's not how it works. And one of the most impactful things I was ever taught a number of years ago was the idea that motivation follows action. That we aren't motivated and then we start and then we get motivated. Because if I start doing something and I start seeing that, oh, I've consistently shown up 5 days in a row to do this thing, I'm going to feel good about myself. I'm going to feel like I'm achieving something and I'm going to want to keep going, right? Or I'm going to start seeing the results. Hey, I've been practicing my guitar 10 minutes a day and now I know these 3 chords. And now I want to know the next piece. Now I want to do this song. Now I want to do that song. So it starts becoming almost kind of like this momentum that helps us build and build and build. And that is really the key. But in my experience, it's really hard to build that momentum and create that motivation when we're trying to take these giant leaps because we can't build the consistency that we need. So really focusing on kind of the small over time efforts to get us those big results. And
Yeah.
recognizing also that sometimes there are going to potentially be setbacks. There are going to be moments where it's not just a smooth progression on an upward slope, that there will be ups and downs, and that is all part of the process.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, I do often think with when someone does a grand plan, it also is another sort of way of procrastination to keep people in the same place.
Hmm.
Look at this grand plan. It's like, okay, where do you start? It's like you can start in 5,000 different places, and it won't actually get things like executed. It won't get things done. But you, trust me, I have been there. I've got a T-shirt. I've got videos, DVDs. Like, hey, I've even got a laser disc. But that's another story, kids. What is a laser disc? Something way, way back in the day. But yeah, I have to ask now. Whew, with all of the things you're doing, and like, yeah, podcasting being one of them, where would you like your journey to take you in the, say, the next 3 years? Or
That's a great question. So I will tell you just a really quick aside about podcasting. I had never really listened to podcasts until the pandemic came in 2020. And then I ended up kind of guesting on a podcast that one of my coaches was doing, just kind of about her business, and had some folks that she was working with come in and talk. And that was my first foray into podcasting. And then I did a podcast on body image that was like a friend of a friend that I knew through business networking. Um, and then I really liked it. And then I did another one with somebody who I saw in a group was just looking for guests, and I really liked that. And I thought, you know what? I actually love talking to people on their podcasts. And so I started pitching myself. And that was one of the goals that I set for myself in 2024, was that I was going to pitch podcasts. And to go back to that fear, right? If you
Mhm.
haven't really done something, you haven't made a name for yourself, um, and you've also been in a situation, and I'm sure you know this being in this world, but not every outreach is going to be a yes. You're not always going to hear back from people. And so there's a rejection element of, oh, I pitched 20 podcasts and maybe I didn't hear back from 15 of them. Or maybe and so that has been an interesting journey, but I've really learned to focus on the positive. So like I said, I decided, 2024, I'm going to kind of make this my year of doing podcasts because I'm having so much fun with it. And I don't even know the number. I was thinking I need to check it, but I'm probably have landed about 24 podcasts this year. And just different places based in, US, Canada, UK, and I've had like some really fun conversations like this one. And it's been such a great experience. And so I definitely think I want to continue with that. It's interesting because I'm not somebody who dreams of speaking. Public speaking has never been something I loved. I do it as a function of my work, but I was always that like shy person who didn't like talking in front of people. So now I said that once when I was speaking, and somebody was like, "Well, how'd you get over it?" And I was like, "I didn't." And they kind of look around the room like, "Hello, there's a bunch of people staring at you." And I'm
Two
like, "Well,
dozen
this is
people
just
here.
my job." Yeah, I'm like, "This is
Yeah.
just my job." And so trying to figure out, because I do love speaking about things I'm passionate about, whether it's in conversation like this or just, I used to do social audio on Clubhouse. I did a Saturday morning mindset room. And there would be times where people would come and engage, but there would be a lot of Saturdays where people just sat and listened. And sometimes for almost an hour, I would just be talking about some mindset topic and sharing tips and ideas and perspectives and stories. And I would get messages from people like, "Oh, thank you so much for this," or, asking questions that they didn't necessarily want to share publicly. And I
Mm.
loved that. So that's definitely something. I don't know what it's going to look like 3 years from now, but I definitely want to continue being able to engage in these kinds of conversations. I've had people talk to me about whether I would start my own podcast.
Hmm.
I'm going to be honest, I don't know that I would. I enjoy meeting people through this process, and it's been so lovely that um, I think maybe just doing more of this, but also looking at other ways to kind of speak, but in a way that I don't have to travel. That's the weird thing. I have two, I'm actually surprised you haven't heard them, but I have a couple of dogs who are amazing. But one of them, especially, is older and has some health stuff. And so I don't like to be away from him. So I don't want to, I'm not one of those people that's like, "Oh, I want to travel all around and speak on big stages." I'm like, only if I can take my little dog with me. I want to take both of them. So that becomes a little complex. But I think in terms of just my work, I want to be able to continue pushing these conversations about the fact that it's okay to say no and that it's really important for our own lives, and not in just a selfish, again, air quotes way. Some people are like, "Oh, yes, it's important to learn to say no so that we can create time for the things that light us up to pursue our own goals." But also, I really think that there's a correlation between our ability to set boundaries and say no, that allows us, and it allows us to like lean into the things that are most meaningful. So if I show up for things that matter to me, and I show up as my best self because I want to be there, that's going to
Hmm.
strengthen my relationships. It's going to strengthen my presence and how I show up in the world for other people, for myself. As opposed to if I'm saying yes to everything and showing up resentful and frazzled and exhausted, I'm not actually giving my best self to the world. So I wanted to keep encouraging people to lean into that, certainly through my coaching, but really through any other opportunities that pop up. And I know that's kind of a vague answer, but I really don't know in 3 years. I feel like I'm always open to, what's life going to bring me? Because had you asked me 3 years ago, the idea that we'd be sitting here recording a podcast was not even on my radar, and yet it's one of my favorite things. So I think, I want to keep doing this work. I want to keep helping people grow and change and live their best lives. And I want to be in a place where I'm saying yes to ways that do that, that bring me joy and bring me fulfillment, because that's the other piece of it. I believe that you can do very impactful things in the world and not martyr yourself to that cause, but help others, but also help others in ways that bring you joy. So I guess that's what I want to be doing in 3 years.
Now, all I've got to simply say is, in 3 years' time, people, I'm going to say it here first. Like, yeah, Becky will have her own podcast, and she'll have like about 200 guests who's been on it. Because, yeah, um, it like you say you enjoy this process. You say you enjoy like coming into other people's podcasts and everything like this. Yeah, look, I can just see you having your own podcast, like going to people you want to like speak to as well. So there's a sort of give and take of that as well. So I can see you being a podcast. And yeah, I don't know when, maybe this year, maybe like next year, but yes, but within the next 3 years, I can see you owning your own podcast and having a myriad of guests come on. Like, yes, countless. And yeah, spreading that word of wisdom you hold within you, and yeah, you like how can I say, put out in a refreshing way. So yeah, it's
Well,
gonna
thank you.
happen. I can tell. I can tell.
I'll
Yeah.
tell one of my best friends will be happy to hear that. She used to tell me all the time that I should start a podcast. So I'll tell her you said so. She'll be a
Yeah,
fan.
yes. I'm not one of your best friends. I've just met you. I'm saying you should start your own podcast. Just saying. Hashtag just saying. Oh, brilliant. Now, I have no more questions to ask at this present time. But Becky, I'd like to say thank you for coming on. Can you let the people know how they can find you out there in this great big world of ours?
Absolutely. I feel like I try to be in all the social places, but I'm only really in a couple. I am on Facebook as Higher Good Coaching, and that's higher with a GH, like higher purpose. And I am on Instagram at Becky Upchurch _. And then email is always an option, Becky at highergoodcoaching.com. And I will share with you if you're interested in this, if you think that your listeners would be interested. I recently created a resource. It's called The People Pleaser's Guide to Saying No. And it kind of helps people, whether they identify as people pleasers or not, I think it's still helpful. And it kind of helps people start that process of saying no and being able to say no with a bit more ease and a bit more comfort. So if that's something that you feel like your listeners would be interested in, I can send you that link for the show notes, and then people can connect with me through that as well.
Oh, please do. Please do. Ah, brilliant. Outstanding. Yes. People, my friends, my life warriors, go out there. Find Becky. Yes. Tap into this knowledge of hers and yeah, take full advantage of it. And yeah, help your mindset change and grow to being people you want to be. But I'd like to say thank you once again to Becky for coming on to the show today.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. The pleasure's all mine. And I'd like to say thank you to you, my friends, my life warriors, for coming, listening to us, sticking with us to the end of the show. Please stay well, stay safe, be awesome, be excellent, be fantastic. Be all the positive bees you can be in this world and then some. Ah, have a great day, guys. Yes. Peace. And we are